Okay, 100B. Ooh, triple digits. That's exciting. Baseball batting average. Yeah. Okay. 100B. So I think we're up to the last edition of the chapter. So, should we just skip it? No. Okay. So, Shtei Alechem, the two breads that are eaten on Shavuot are Nachalin, Ein Pachos Mishnayim, no less than 2 days to eat it, V'lo Yoser al Shlosha, and no more than 3 days to eat it. What's the case? Ketzad Nefos Me'erev Yontif, they're baked. Erev Yontif, so let's say Yontif this year's on a Friday Shabbos. It's going to be an example coming up. But 2 days they're baked before Yom Tov, and then Nechalos B'Yom Tov L'Shnayim. The 2 days to eat them on Yom Tov. Chal Yom Tov Lios Acher Shabbos. So let's say Shavuos was on a Sunday. So now Shavuos on a Sunday, you can't bake on Shabbos. You can bake on Friday. So, yeah. So Chal Yom Tov Lios Acher Shabbos Nechalos L'Shlosha. So then you're going to have, not that you have 3 days to eat it, but you can eat it 3 days after they're baked. How many days can you eat it after they're baked? Either 2 days or 3 days. If Shabbos directly precedes it, then you have 3 days. If not, then you have 3 days. Now, lechem apanim, the weekly breads on Shabbos for the Kohanim, they're nechal ein pakos mitisha, no less than 9 days after they're baked. V'lo yoser al echad asar, but not more than 11. What's the case? Ketzad nefal me'erev Shabbos, so they're baked on a Friday. V'nechal b'Shabbos, v'nechal b'Shabbos letisha. So they're baked erev Shabbos, let's say Friday. So I guess we're counting in, meaning Friday, Shabbos, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos. 9 days. Include Friday. Friday counts as the first day. The following Shabbos will be the 9th day. Chal Yom Tov Lios. So that's Nechal Shabbos Letisha. Chal Yom Tov Lios Erev Shabbos. Let's say you have a holiday Erev Shabbos. Like this year, Chal Yom Tov Lios Erev Shabbos. Shavuos this year is Erev Shabbos. So you have a holiday Erev Shabbos. So now Nechal Le'asara, because you're going to have to bake them now the day before the Yom Tov. Yeah, so Thursday.
Well, you can't have Wednesday because Thursday, Friday, 2 day Yom Tov.
No, but the Yom Tov is on Friday. It's Thursday and Friday. So you're baking Thursday. So now count Thursday as the first day. When you get to the following Shabbos, you get to 10 days. Okay. That's Nechal Asar. Yeah.
And here they say the 11th. Okay.
Right. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Regular case is 9, now 10, now 11 coming up. So, Shnei Yamim Tovim Rosh Hashanah. So now you have 2 days Rosh Hashanah. So now, Ne'echal Le'echad Asar. Now you're going to eat on the 11th day. Ve'eino docha lo Shabbos v'lo Yom Tov. So now, let's see how this is going to work. If you have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah before Shabbos, so Rosh Hashanah comes out on a Thursday, Friday. So what happens? You got to bake them on Wednesday. Now, you bake them on Wednesday. And if you count 11 days, it's going to be Shabbos. Now, in this case, that Rosh Hashanah is on a Thursday, Friday. So if Rosh Hashanah is on a Thursday, it's the first of the month of Tishrei. 10 days later is Yom Kippur on a Shabbos. So Rashi says it really should be 12 days, not 11 days. But he says in this case, when it comes to sacrifices, we really count the night follows the day. So really, even though you can't eat it that Shabbos, but we view the night follows the day. So really, we're going to count 11, meaning I guess Motzi Shabbos counts as 11. Yeah. So it's still called 11, even though you're eating it on a Sunday, but the night follows the day instead of the day following the night. So it's still the 11th, even though it's a not Sunday, Motzi Shabbos. Motzi Shabbos, right? In general, the new day starts at nighttime. So 11 days after Thursday is Rosh Hashanah. So that means 10 days later is Yom Kippur. It also is Shabbos. So you can only eat the bread on Saturday night, Motzi Shabbos. So you would think that's a new day already because a Jewish day starts at nighttime. And it comes to sacrifices, the night follows the day. So the Motzi Shabbos that night is still connected to that day. So it's still called 11, not 12. Okay. So that's 9, 10, and 11. Yeah, because that baking doesn't push away Shabbos and not Rosh Hashanah, and not any other. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Haskan. So Rabbi Shimon, the son of Gamliel, said in the name of Rabbi Shimon, the son of the Skan, the deputy Kohen Gadol, Doch as a Yom Tov, ain't a Doch as Yom Tzom, as Yom Tzom. It does push away. It would push away Yom Tov. However, it's not going to push away Yom Kippur. So if Yom Kippur falls out Erev Shabbos, you will not bake it on Yom Kippur. So now, Amar Ravina, based on our Mishnah, says Ravina that there are two opinions if you can bring voluntary offerings on Yom Tov or not in Masechtas Beitza. So, according to the opinion, Haomer Nidarim v'Nidavos Ein Kraven B'Yom Tov, that voluntary sacrifices cannot be brought on Yom Tov. So, Lo Tema, don't say that the understanding of that is Midaraisa Mechsachaz of Rabbanu Hudigazru. Meaning, you read a Gemara, it says you cannot bring voluntary sacrifices on Yom Tov. So you ask yourself, is that biblical or is that rabbinic? Which one is it? I don't know. So it says Ravina, don't say really biblically it's fine. Just rabbinically they made a decree. Rabbanu Hudigazru Shelo Yisha, that and the rabbis were worried that it's going to be left over. You're going to leave it. You're going to leave it for the next Yom Tov, and then you might delay bringing it. Don't say that. Rather, biblically, according to that opinion, biblically, voluntary offerings are not fit to be brought on a holiday. What's my proof from our Mishnah? They're not fit even biblically. Why? The two breads on Shavuos, it's an obligation of the day to bring it. Not voluntary. You have to do it. You have to bring it that day. That's a chovas hayomhu, and yet you can't bake it on Shavuos. V'leikele meimar, and here there's no worry of Shema Yisha. Shema Yisha is a worry that the worry is that in the middle of the year you're going to volunteer to bring an offering, and you're just going to push it off until the holiday. We don't want you to do that. We don't want you to push it off. So you would think that maybe that's the reason why you can't bring offerings on Yom Tov. So it'll solve our procrastination issue, between fulfilling your dues and your donations, right? However, you can't say that's the logic because look over here where it's not voluntary, it's obligatory. Here, there's no worry of maybe you'll push it off because you can't bring the two breads on today. You can't bring that. It's only on Shavuos, and yet vikatani ein adocha lows the Shabbos lows, and yet we still say that you can't bring that up on a holiday or on Shabbos. So the opinion that holds that a voluntary offering cannot be brought on Yom Tov or Shabbos is a biblical thing, not a rabbinic thing. Okay. Next up, Menachos. Sounds familiar. V'hanesachim. So you have flour offerings and you have libations. Question is, they got impure. When can you redeem them, or can you redeem them? And does it matter if they're impure or not? Is there redemption? Is there a redemption process by them? So says the Mishnah, it depends. As long as they're designated, but they haven't been put into a service vessel and sanctified, you can redeem it. However, once they went into a vessel, then they have no, you can't redeem it because it's something called Kedushas HaGuf. So we know that there's two kinds of sanctity in the temple. One is more of its monetary value. It's a lower level of sanctity. It's called Kedushas Damim, not like blood, rather like money. That it's its monetary value. So you can offer something's monetary value to the temple. That's one. The second one is called Kedushas HaGuf. It's a bodily sanctity. it itself is holy, not its value, but it itself is holy. So right now the assumption is that as long as you don't put it into a service vessel, so it only has a lower level of sanctity, only its monetary value is sanctified. It itself, until you put it into the vessel, is not. Once it itself has kedushas haguf, it itself has its own sanctity, then there is no redemption. You cannot redeem it. Once, let's say an animal, or in this case, the flour offering, it's put into a vessel, and now it itself becomes sanctified, not just its monetary value. Until you put it into the vessel, you promise to bring flour, but this flour, that flour, it is designated, but doesn't have intrinsic sanctity to it. Therefore, you could redeem it. And however, if it has intrinsic sanctity to it, then there is no ability to redeem. So that's by flour offerings and by libations. What about by birds, trees, and incense? So, and the frankincense, the ha'ofos, the ha'etzim, the ha'levona, the klisharis, and a service vessel. So 4 things. Mishenitmu, once they become impure, ein lahen pidyon, they also do not have any ability to be redeemed. Shelo namar pidyon ela bebehema, because the only redemption is by an animal. Yeah, which is interesting because the beginning of the Mishnah, right? We have by the flour offerings and the libations. So that's not an animal yet. You could redeem it, but what it means is that we're going to see that only an animal which has intrinsic sanctity to it, we're going to see once it gets a blemish, you could redeem it. So it doesn't mean that the only thing that could be redeemed is an animal. What it means is the only thing with intrinsic kedushas haguf, its bodily sanctity, that could be redeemed is an animal. But so the first part of the Mishnah doesn't yet have that level of intrinsic value. So therefore, it's not a contradiction. It has monetary value. Therefore, you could redeem it. But the bird or the wood or the incense, that get put right up on the altar, they don't have that middle ground of getting put into a service vessel. So you would think they have bodily, like intrinsic value, intrinsic sanctity. Maybe they do. However, we'll see that only an animal that has that intrinsic level of sanctity is able to be redeemed. Okay, says Shmuel. So the beginning of the Mishnah said, flour offerings and libations, which became impure. Says Shmuel, that doesn't matter if they're impure or not. Even if they're pure, they still can be redeemed. So the Mishnah says, it sounds like from the Mishnah, only if flour offerings and libations that become impure, that were never in a service vessel, can become redeemed. Shmuel says no. Even if they were pure, as long as they were not in a service vessel, they could be redeemed. So, Amar Shmuel vafilu hein tahor niftin, even if they're pure, a regular flour offering, until you put into the vessel, it could become redeemed. You could redeem it onto a coin, redeem its sanctity onto a coin. Now, says the Gemara, my time. Well, what's the reason? Very simple. Until you put into a vessel, it only has a lower level of sanctity. It's a monetary sanctity, and therefore you can redeem it onto money, and therefore it's no longer sanctified. Yeah. What's the problem? That's not what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says only if it's impure can you redeem it. Shmuel comes along and says even if it's pure you could redeem it. So the question is Shmuel, but the Mishnah doesn't say like you. And Shmuel can't argue with the Mishnah. The hanitma'u tanan, it says if the flour and the libation become impure. So says Shmuel, classic answer to a Mishnah that has a difficulty is that you have 2 parts of the Mishnah. You have part A and part B. Part B, I had to teach the novelty of it being impure. Part A, I didn't have to, but I did it to parallel part B. Easier for memorization, stylistically better. So just because I have part A saying that it's impure, it doesn't mean that it's coming to exclude when it's pure. It's because part B said impure and I needed that I had to teach. So part A paralleled that case. So It says impure. It's the same halacha, even if it's impure. The kabai misna seifa, since we had to teach the latter part of the Mishnah, mishakitchu b'kli, once the flour and the libations became sanctified in a holy vessel, ein lehen pidyon, you can't redeem them. Da'afilu nitmu, even when they became impure. Da'afilu nitmu namilo. So even after you're in the service vessel and it became impure, you would have thought maybe if it became impure, you could redeem it. We'll see why you would have thought that. But the answer is you can't. Tananami Reisha, the first case also was a case of where it taught it when it was impure. Achlo kitchu b'kli. So that's how Shmuel gets out of that issue. I find that this is a hard part for people. I find on Sunday mornings when we give a class, like the Torah says X, sometimes the Rashi or the Gemara will say Y. That's not what it says. But you're viewing things one-dimensional. That it says it's different, has to be. Maybe it says this for a certain reason. It's not coming to exclude other things, right? Give a good example to that. But the Torah is not one-dimensional, right? So it could say a word to teach you a certain novelty, but not coming to exclude other things. It needed for a specific purpose, right? We'll see today an example of it. So the principle could be a principle that applies throughout. The application was in one case for a specific reason, but the principle is true across the board. So says the Gemara, 1 second, I don't understand. What's this novelty that if it's in a vessel and it became impure, you can't redeem it? Why is that that's obvious? Hapshita kiddush saguf ninhu. Once put into a vessel, it has that higher level of sanctity. So of course, you cannot redeem it. Says the Gemara, well, what's our paradigm case? Is an animal which has that intrinsic level of sanctity, and yet we know that an animal that gets a blemish, what's called a mum, that could be redeemed. Not only that, but the Torah refers to it as tameh, yeah. So you would have thought that just like an animal that's blemished can be redeemed, maybe things that are impure is also like a blemish, just like a blemish to an animal, so to impurity to the libations and the flour offerings. So it's true. We need the Nimish to teach you that that's not true. Why? A blemished animal is referred to in the Torah as tameh, as impure. So therefore, you'd have thought that impure, something which is impure, like libations or flour offerings, nami kibal mum dami. It's going to be considered like a blemish. And just like an animal that gets a blemish and it's referred to as impure, you could redeem it when it has a blemish. Haninami lifrok. So to these libations and flour offerings, when they become impure, they're like blemished animals. Same thing. You think you could therefore redeem it? Kamash Malan? No. Kamash Malan. This kind of impurity is not what the Torah was referring to when it says a blemished animal can be redeemed. The next page. We don't find that things after being in a service vessel, after being in the sanctified vessel, can become redeemed. So when the Torah says that certain things can be redeemed, it was not referring to things that were placed into a kli sharis, into a service vessel. Even Rashi points out that even an animal after it's been sanctified, what's that case? When you slaughter it, you also can't redeem it. So meaning it's the same way our libations are put into a vessel, or the flour offerings put into a vessel, and now it's sanctified. An animal, before it gets slaughtered, you can redeem it if it has a blemish. But once it gets slaughtered, you can't. So such a redemption we never found. Yeah, point of no return, exactly. The point of no return. Yeah, good. So ubal mum heichi ikri tameh. Where do you find that a blemished animal is called impure? The Tanya, it says in the Brisa, Vim Kol. I don't think this is this parsha. The end of this parsha or next parsha? I think it's Parak Chav Zayin. I don't have the psukim over here, do I? Oh, I do. 27. This is parsha 23, 24. No, I think maybe Parsha Bahar. So either way, any impure animal you can't bring as a sacrifice to Hashem. So the Gemara says, obviously we're talking about animals that got blemished, and you redeemed them. You can't bring those up on the altar. So it says the Gemara, you think that the apostle is referring to a blemished animal. It just says impure. It doesn't say blemished. You think it's referring to a blemished animal which became redeemed. Oh, but maybe it's referring to behemoth mamish, a impure animal, that became impure. A corpse touched it or something like that. It became impure, not an animal that was blemished and redeemed. So how do you know it's referring to a blemished and redeemed animal? In another verse, so it already talks about a impure animal, so that which you redeemed it according to its value. Hare behemoth tmeya amura. It already talks about a behemoth tmeya, an impure animal. And what does the other verse mean then by an impure animal? It's referring to an animal of Bali Mumin, an animal of that were blemished and redeemed. Because one verse already tells about an impure animal that's redeemed. So the seeming repetition is talking about a Bali Mum, a impure, blemished animal that's redeemed. Okay. Now, you would, once we're here, we're going to mention parenthetically, Yachol Yiftu al Mum Over. There's always two kinds of blemishes. There is a Mum Over. Over means to pass, passes by. And then there is a Mum Kavua. It's permanent, right? Person knocks an eye out, that's permanent. A person gets a boo-boo. The kid thinks it's permanent, but it's temporary. Yeah. In the Song of Songs in Shir Shirim, so it says there right in the beginning that a Jew, our sins, it's like a tan, or it's like darkness. It's like darkness. It's like dirt on the skin, meaning it's not permanent. It's not part of who we are. You can get rid of it. So, yeah, when I came back 6 months into yeshiva, I went back to my high school to daven in the morning there to visit. So, I was already 6 months monotheistic. So I already had my tzitzis and this and that, and I was shocking like I've been religious for 120 years. So somebody walks up to me afterwards, a current 12th grader who I know, and a friend of mine. He's like, "Yeah, it's like a suntan. It'll pass. Don't worry." Yeah. So anyways, so a customer that Yachol Yiftu al Mum Over, you would have thought that's going to pass. That even for a blemish, which is a passing blemish, that for that you could redeem an animal. Talmud Lama Ashelo Yakub Remenu Korban Lashem, something which will never be brought to Hashem, meaning Misha Eina Krevel Hashem Kollel ever, when it won't be brought ever. Yatztazu, this is excluded. Eina Kreva Hayom Krevel Lamachar, a temporary blemish. Today you can't bring it. A week later you can bring it when the blemish heals. So therefore, a animal that has a permanent blemish is one that can be redeemed. One that has a temporary blemish cannot be redeemed. At one point, the Gemara somewhere goes through the blemishes. I believe maybe that's by Kohanim. I don't remember. I think the Gemara goes through. Yeah. Okay. Now, most of Rav Huna. So now Rav Huna is going to ask. Shmuel made a statement that said, when our Mishnah says that libations and flower offerings that became impure, it meant even when they're pure, both pure and impure, but specifically even when they're pure, you could redeem it. On that, Rav Huna is going to have a difficulty. Most of Rav Huna bar Manoach, Rav Huna, the son of Manoach, says as follows: Ha'ophos, birds, v'ha'etzim, wood, ha'lavona, incense, frankincense, v'klisharis. 4 things that our Mishnah also spoke about, shenitmu, that became impure, ein lehen pidyon. They don't have any redemption. Shalom namar pidyon elava behema. The only time we had a redemption was by a animal and not by these things. Okay, let's see how this is going to contradict what Shmuel said. So let's see. Bishlama ophos. I understand a bird has intrinsic kedusha. It has a high level of sanctity, that intrinsic sanctity to it. It's called kedusha saguf, minhu. And the only thing that has intrinsic sanctity that could be redeemed is going to be a animal. Below namar ela bebehema, only by an animal, not by a bird. So, but hold on. Why can wood, ela eitim levona v'klishares, wood, incense, and a service vessel, why can't they be redeemed? Lifriku, redeem them. What's the reason why you cannot redeem these things if they became impure? Ella lav mishum the tehorim ba'alma einiftin. It's because things in general that are pure cannot be redeemed. The haninami, these things, wood, incense, vessel, even though they're impure, but they're considered like they're pure. Haninami afagav denitmu. However, their status is one of they're like pure things. Keterm. Why? Well, because really, eitim and lavona, wood and incense, they're not really lav b'nei asher uchlaninu. If not for the fact that you had to do something that they were brought up as a sacrifice, and now the rules of impurity apply, the rules of impurity would never apply to them. Regular wood does not get contaminated. Okay, so that's wood. So lav b'nei ashri uchlaninu. They're not a ela chibas hakodesh m'shavelo ochla. It's just literally the endearment of the kodesh, meaning we need them for the base of Mikdash. So now they can become impure. But really who they are items that are really tahor. They're really things that are not susceptible to impurity. So, for example, the eitzim, wood. As long as you don't cut them to use for the pyre, so then lo miskashri, they'll never be susceptible to accept impurity. It's only because we need them for the pyre, and once you're involved in the temple, there are special rules about you not becoming impure. But really, wood, logs of wood, do not become impure. Livona nami, this incense also, incense is not food, has become impure. It's only because you put into a vessel, and now special rules of impurity apply to it. Livona nami, kamatalo kitcha bekli sharetz loy miskashra. It does not become susceptible to impurity. So these items, even though there are laws of impurity, but those are unique. Those are unique to the temple. But really, it itself is not something that can attain a level where it can be susceptible to impurity. Right, but wood in what it is, we're outside the temple will never become impure.
Making a key.
Oh, if wood becomes a kli, that's true. If you make a wood into a wooden cup. Well, I guess the wood, the way it is, the logs. You cut the wood for the wood. That's not impure, but it's only when you put on the pyre, it'll have a special.
I'm just wondering if it's not a key. Once it's cut into the size for the.
It doesn't have a receptacle.
It's got a receptacle.
It's not movable. We saw the table, the shulchan, the base of Mikdash. We had to come up with an answer why it got impure. And the answer was because 3 times a year you pick it up, so it's now movable. And if it's movable, it's similar to a sack. But aside from it being movable, or if it has no receptacle, or it doesn't have a gold covering, so then it wouldn't become impure. A kli shares. Okay, here we go. This is a kli shares. This is a bigger novelty. It also is going to have a status of. It's considered like it's pure. Why? Because you can always put it into the mikvah. Kli shares nami hova islu tahara b'mikvah. So all these items, there's a way. Either they don't usually become impure, or even if they do, there's a way out. You can put it into the mikvah, and it'll become pure. I hear what you're saying. I'm thinking now. Your previous question. When you look at the wood in the temple, is the understanding that it's just logs and it's a special halacha that logs could become impure, or the logs become a vessel because they're being used to hold stuff on them or something like that, and that's why. Meaning, is it under the regular rules of impure? Right. It sounds like a log is a log. I don't know. Yeah, special rules of Beis Hamikdash. Yeah. So
no such thing as that stress.
right, that's true. So so now one second. Okay, so 1 second. So Shmuel said that even when they're in a state of purity, they can become redeemed. However, when they're in a state of purity, you have to be susceptible to becoming impure. And says Rav Huna that we see from here that these things, that even though they could become impure when they're used in the temple, but in their essence, they're really impure, right? And they're really impure. They're really pure. They have a status of pure that they will not be susceptible to becoming impure. So, 1 second. So 1 second. Yeah. So the question was, what was the reason that wood and the incense and the service vessel? What's the reason that? 1 second. That when they become impure, you can't redeem it, right? We said a bird itself has intrinsic kedusha to it. Therefore, you cannot redeem it. Then the Bryce said this statement asked, what about wood, incense, and service vessels? Why can they never be redeemed? Let you redeem them. It must be because pure things can never be redeemed. Therefore, these things, even when they're impure, but they have a status of being pure, either because they really never could, really in general, they're not susceptible to impurity, or because even a vessel that becomes impure, you can put into the mikvah. Aside from that, we have no explanation of why can't a service vessel or incense or wood, when it becomes impure, why can't you redeem it? It doesn't have intrinsic value, intrinsic sanctity to it. The only reason we have it must be that pure things like this can pure things like this can never be redeemed. And why can they never be redeemed? It must be because they're in their essence, they are things that are not really permanently impure, either because they cannot be susceptible generally to impurity, or because even if they are, it's temporary. It's like a blemish that passes because you can put it right into the mikvah. So that must, anyway, if that's the reason, that's against Shmuel, because Shmuel says that even when these things, flour and libations, even when they are pure, they could be redeemed. So now, says him or no? Well, la'olam emalach tahorin ba'al maniftin. Say in general, when these things are pure, they could be redeemed. So if they could be redeemed, so how come these things, after being in the service vessel, how come they cannot be redeemed? The hani mishum delo shchichi. It's the reason why they can't be redeemed, it sounds like it's more rabbinic, is because they're not so common. They're not so common, and therefore, if you redeem it and take away its sanctity, it's going to be hard to find these items to be used for the Beis Hamikdash. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Which part's not easily found? Bishma levona v'kli shares. Okay, certain incense, certain service vessels, gold, specially fashioned. I understand. That's hard to make. Ella eitzim, wood. Not hard to find wood. So why are you telling me that wood, when it becomes impure, you cannot redeem it? So why not? Don't tell me it's not common. You can go outside and chop wood, and then you can get yourself wood for the temple. So why is that considered not common? And therefore, rabbinically, you cannot redeem it if it becomes impure. Eitzim mishashchichi. No, eitzim nami came into Amar. Since we had earlier, Damar Mar, master said, Kol eitzim tzabot tolas puzzle. Any wood that a worm is found inside, wormy wood, that is not valid for the temple. Therefore, it is not so easy to find wood that hasn't had a worm go through it. I don't know, nowadays. I mean, it's percentage, it's only 1 or 2%. So the wood itself, only a small percentage of it got wormed.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so why exactly? Okay, I hear what you're saying. What does it mean, lo shchichi? How are you? Okay. Davening is at 8 o'clock. Dark at 8:15.
Okay.
Yeah, we're finishing in a minute, but sure.
Okay.
So, Amar of Papa. So now, says Rav Papa, Ishmiele. The reason why Shmuel said what he said is only because he didn't hear of this. But Ishmiele Shmuel, he would have retracted. So the following is, if Shmuel would have heard the following case, he would have retracted. Hadetanya, the following brisa, Hamatris Tmin Lebedakabayis, if you sanctify regular, not blemished, pure things to the bedekabayis, to the temple treasury, Ein Podino Son El Mizbeach. You can only redeem it to be used for the altar. Shekol Haroy Lemizbeach, Eino Yotzim Mizbeach. Anything that could be used for the altar cannot be used for anything else, even if it's a monetary value. But if it could be used for the altar, so then you sell it and you use it for the. You could redeem it and use it for the altar, but you can't use it for mundane purposes. So, let's say, for example, an animal, a regular animal, so that you designated its monetary value. So even though you could redeem it, when that gets redeemed, you have to use it to buy sacrifices for the temple, because since the animal itself could be used for the temple, for the altar, so therefore, even if it's monetary value, when it's redeemed, it can only be used for the altar. So that would mean that even things like Menachos and Nesachim, flower offerings and libations, which Shmuel said that when they're pure, you could redeem them, it would be against his brisa, because those things you could use for the temple. And anything that could be used for the temple, you can't just make them mundane. So, even though it's monetary, it's a lower level of sanctity, it's a monetary sanctity, since they are pure and they can be used for the temple. So how could you, Shmuel, tell me that libations and flower offerings, that even when they're pure, can be redeemed? Those things are things that could be used for the altar. So therefore, you cannot just redeem them and make them mundane. So if you would have heard this, have a haderbe. If Shmuel would have heard this brisa, he would have retracted. Says the Gemara below, it's not true. Shmuel heard this, velo haderbe. Shmuel heard this, and he did not retract. So we'll have to see tomorrow why. Okay.